Hello, everybody. Welcome, and thanks for giving me this opportunity. Shortly, a pitch about ourselves. We're a small law firm in the Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia area. We represent about 200, 250 IT companies, including maybe a quarter of those in the game industry. And basically what we're going to do today is not necessarily talk about our professional experience, but also about our empirical experience, considering that we represent many companies that whether, how they do things right or how they do things wrong. And the thing that I want to start with is about the concept called survival bias. For those who never heard of that, it's a theory developed by Abraham Wald. He's a descendant from Hungary. Basically, the misconception is that if you want to be successful, you want to focus on things that other people did successfully. And that's what people, not in this audience, but in the audience that listen to Wargaming and Rovio did. And rather than listen to yours truly, they went to view them. But again, this is a misconception. The truth is, when you focus just on the success, rather than look at the failures, the difference between the failure and the success become invisible. Basically, his theory was, Abraham Wald's, is that when the airplanes from U.S. Air Force and Royal Air Force during World War II were coming up, the Ministry of Defense asked, so which part of the planes were supposed to basically put extra armor in? And obviously the military said, okay, here's a hole, let's patch that hole. His approach was different. He basically said, no. We're looking at the planes that actually returned back on the base. So if there was a hole, the planes still survived. The airplanes that never returned, those are the holes that we have to patch. So basically he told them to patch and armor things that were not damaged on the plane that returned. So we are going to look today at planes that never returned. So basically, by the way, the lady is not Abraham Wald, for those who didn't know this. And this is a little pitch for our client, Gaijin, and the War Thunder game. And no ladies or airplanes were damaged in this demonstration. Basically, we're going to talk about today the couple things, how people do things wrong, how they screw up their business. I mean, you get presentation in these wonderful conferences, how to write the games, how to launch them. I, on the other hand, basically will tell you, I can see the clients and a lot of companies that essentially fail. And why do they fail? So let's patch those holes. First of all, co-founders of the project. Basically, you write a game, you get a concept, and you share too much information. Basically, a lot of information gets stolen. So make sure before you start sharing a lot of information, you actually have an idea or term sheet. And basically, a lot of people try to find somebody that, if you're a programmer, you're a good game designer, they actually look for, not necessarily for part of the team, they actually look for somebody that is exactly as them. That's not a good team building. Be greedy. One of the first concepts of the startup is like, oh, I'll give you 50%, I'll give you 90% of shares or whatever. Don't do that. Be greedy. And use the concept so-called vesting and reverse vesting. People have to deserve the shares in your company. So you can say, okay, if you work with my company for 5 years, I'll get you 1% for each year you work. But you don't give up too much equity right away. And manage mutual expectations. Sometimes you get somebody, a hungry student to work for you, and or somebody gives you money. Sometimes when people's expectations are different, you don't really know whether it's a loan, it's a share, he actually works for you, he's going to be employed. So that's a problem. So, and if possible, even if you don't have ability to hire a lawyer, if you're not a lawyer, you never heard of the law existence, put something on paper. Have a solid contract if you could. However, one of the things people don't realize, law doesn't necessarily exist just for you to avoid it, or not necessarily exist just for you to pay taxes. Law is actually your ally. So if you live by the law sometimes will protect you, even if you don't do anything. So people don't think in those concepts. So if you use corporate law, corporate law, by the way, which was born in this wonderful country, will protect some of the things you never thought of. That the Dutch people did 300 years ago. So if you have a good jurisdiction, UK, US, or European Union, some of the things you do naturally will protect you. So, and one of the things also, skin in the game. People ask me, what is the skin in the game? sometimes what happens is you have a partner expectations and you get a partner that you work with, but to be honest with you, he works for some company or a sourcing company for 12 hours a day. You put, some heavy reliance on him, and then he really doesn't do anything. So make sure, maybe, of course, it's, maybe it's moonshining on the side for you, but still, you have to be able to work with your partner or whoever you work with. So this is about, partners and company formation and foundation. So when you form a company, make sure you at least have, similar to building a software or a game, you have some vision, some structure of how the companies are operating or how it works. So basically, if there's too much uncertainty, you don't know, you never read corporate law, you can just rely on corporate law. Some of the things that corporate law have done to protect and make sure the partners, are agreeable. Why do you form a company? One of the things people don't realize is that the whole idea of forming a company was to protect your personal assets. So unless you want to pledge, your wife, mother-in-law, and your house and your cars, building a company, even if it fails and it's copyright infringement, it's going to protect your personal assets. And it's basically as a basis for growth. So there's one thing that everybody is looking into. In order for you, if you're successful, for you to actually grow, finance, sell the company, and go and dive with a parachute somewhere, you really need to have one asset that you first of all you build value at, and then on the other hand you can actually sell. It's called fungible. Choice of jurisdiction. Basically, I'm not going to focus on that too much, but obviously you do European Union or US versus offshore. And this is not really a legal question, it's more a question of mentality. Are you going to be chased to the rest of your life moving money from one piece to another, or actually building something, you're paying taxes but you're driving on good roads and not really focusing on that. So my approach to this is that the business's purpose is not to pay less taxes. The business's purpose is to make more money. So and sometimes people, again, don't realize it. If you're an offshore company, you might be worth $100,000. If you're not an offshore company, you might be worth millions. So make sure you take this into consideration when you build. So, and quickly, when you agree with a partner, go over some of the things that are sort of a key provision among partners. Sometimes when you talk with your partner, you basically come and say, listen, I give you a quarter of my company, 25%. The problem is that 25% seems like numbers, but it's really a vague concept. Why? Because you get another guy, you give him 25%, you get another guy, give him 10%, and the first guy comes and says, no, you told me I have 25%. And then it basically misunderstanding is how it works and how the dilution works. What you really meant, you didn't give him 25%. You told him, I'm going to have 3 parts and you're going to have 1 part. But if we give shares to somebody else, we give shares to an investor, we go IPO, we stay 3-to-1, but you don't have 25%. And I'm telling you, this issue comes up in half of the companies that I deal with that didn't present by a lawyer. Because people have misconception as to what the 25%. I talked to the guy, said, okay, he told you 25%. Well, what about if we get 2 other guys? What about if we get investment? No, I stay 25%. What about if you go IPO? Oh, okay, then I can be diluted maybe to 20. I mean, people really don't have a concept. So if you get anything from my lecture today, when you talk to a partner, don't talk in percentage, talk in ratios, 3-to-1, okay? So 10-to-1, whatever your ratio is. And also, one of the key provisions is BAMBI. If you go 50-50, by me, by you. Basically, it's a really interesting concept we used a couple times. If partners are 50-50, it's tough to actually govern the company because it could basically be a Mexican standoff. What happens in buyout is it's a way to divorce. When you offer to sell your share at a certain price, the other side has the 2 choices, either to buy you out or sell you his shares at that price. So it's basically a quick mechanism for divorce. Drag along, tag along, right first refusal, it's all important. I mean, these are all complicated concepts, but basically what they all mean. Drag along means that if you have, again, in my example, 3-to-1, and then you got the designer, you gave him 5%. The guy comes in, somebody comes and says, listen, you have such a nice company, I wouldn't want to buy you. You two founders are fine, but the designer doesn't want to sell. Well, you can't really just give it away or take it away. That's not Crimea. That's, that's equity. You're supposed to actually sell it. You can't just nationalize it. So the way to drag people into your deal is to have a drag along provision. And if somebody is greedy, he can say, listen, I'm not going to sell my share unless you give me 10 times more. In my experience, a minority shareholder having 1.5% received 14 times more on his share than everybody else. Because the choice was what? We either kill the deal or we just pay off the guy. So make sure it's something like that. Right of first refusal, meaning that whoever has... So again, working shareholders. If you have shareholders that work and shareholders that don't, it has to be an adjustment. If somebody contributed to the company and then gone, and somebody works, I mean, you don't have money to pay. You either pay salary to the guys or you have to adjust the percentage. And percentage, there are different ways to do it. You either reduce the percentage of non-working founders or you actually increase the percentage of founders that work. Board shareholder meeting, basically sometimes even if you have 3, 4, 5 partners, you can say, okay, in order to liquidate a partnership or a company, we have to have unanimous non-compete, non-circumvention, confidentiality. Make sure even if you have the partners, you're still all in the same boat. All right, second, remember we have 5 steps, we have 5 holes that basically we need to patch. The second one is your intellectual property. Everything must go to the company. Again, when I talk to you about the company formation is, when you develop something before you form a company, you have to kind of sell it. I mean, in legal language, it's called assignment. So you assign whatever you've done before to your own company. Once your company is formed, you actually become an outsourcer to your own company. So anything you click is supposed to be property of the company you work for. So, and then this is the way that for you to work on a future development. I mean, some people actually say, I get actually into an argument with some of the mentors that commented whether or not people feel comfortable putting something into the company, or I mean, all of their, I guess, asset related to a game. But you have a choice. You can either scatter your game around in different companies, different places, which you have no value because you can't really gather, you can't really show, or you could work as a person. But if you work as a person, remember that you are basically prone to personal liability. I don't know if you want to again do that. So LN code, one of the things in the game industry, obviously, if you do GPL, GNU, copyleft, LGPL, I call it all hippie code. Make sure that when you have a hippie code that, and you know, you might not care about it, but once you get big, people will. And I can tell you that the foundation that do LGPL and GNU, and they'll go after you if you use against their license. So this is actually a quote from one of our project, basically. Well, there's some code that I use for other projects. And you go like, whoa. I mean, remember, it's like an asset. It has to be owned by somebody. So if you use the code for somebody else or in other projects, it has to be either licensed, it has to be owned by somebody, and whoever uses that code, even the same programmer, for other projects, it has to be licensed. So make sure you don't sell the same code twice. Quickly, things that you need to do. Copyright registration. What is copyright? Copyright is your code, your pictures, your images, actually your characters. If you have a character, you can, like basically, you know, copyright registration for Mickey Mouse is coming up. And basically, as soon as I think, you know, Mickey Mouse becomes older, the United States changes its copyright laws to extend the life of Mickey Mouse. But you know, you might not need your characters to be 70 or 90 years old, so make sure that you actually register if you have a character, you register it so people don't steal the design, website. So why do you register? You register because it's really easy to match. You register something, and there are various types of registration you could do through source code. You could do, and source code, when you do a source code, you only do first 10 pages, last 10 pages. It's easy to prove ownership, and it's actually kind of a declaration, basically for you that it's really yours. What is the practical meaning of that? The practical is basically it's really easy for you to take down your competition. We actually had a real case when a developer left a game, gaming company, and then went on his own. And for some reason, very quickly, in a month, he released, a farm game. And he actually rewrote everything, and as you know, gameplay is not protected by law, but he really loved the cow. Okay, the cow was, I don't know, he married that cow. So, and everything else was redesigned, but the cow was exactly the same. What we did, we circled the cow in iOS, we sent to Apple, and they took it down in like 2 days. Okay, it's a copyright violation. You can't copy stuff. So it's basically easy to take somebody down. Easier to get damages. Easier to get damages. It means it's scarier for even, you can actually scare Apple, you can scare Google, because if they don't take down the infringing stuff, they become eco-conspirator. So it's a real threat in essence, worldwide protection. And also one of the big things is the attorney's fees. Copyright not registered, hard to prove, hard to match disgruntled employees. So I'm actually a little bit running out of time, so I'm going to jump quickly through a couple of things. Trademark registration. Trademark registration, you basically do name of the company, name of the product, and sometimes your company is also trademark. It's basically private, so it was a wonderful presentation by Philip. So if you do a new game, one of the things could happen, if you didn't release the game, you don't have a so-called common law right to your trademark. So your competition can actually go register trademark because you didn't release the game yet, and they can steal it. We have a really bad case when somebody registered trademark because the other company went with all this marketing campaign, all this buzz, everything has been done. We're spending $200,000 on marketing, and their competitor just went in and registered the trademark. So essentially spent $200,000 on advertising their competitor, okay? And that's really sort of sad story. Takedowns, easy to get damages, treble damages. It's basically if you get $1 million damage, and your trademark is registered, you get 3 automatically, just triple. Get back attorney's fees. So intellectual property, what's the main kind of mistakes? Sub-exporters, competitors, so the biggest thing is you get descriptive. You start basically with really bad names for either company or, so Bad Race, Good Farm, Facebook. Actually, Facebook is a bad name, except that if you have a budget to defend it and make it famous. I mean, when we talk about Facebook, we talk about the company, right? Even though every high school in the United States has a Facebook. So if you have a budget like Facebook does, you can name it whatever you want. But if you don't, you got to name it, well. So make sure that it's fanciful. And these are fanciful. PlayZoom, Forzium, Alavar, Playrix, Luxandrava. These are all made-up words. The bad thing is nobody knows what they mean or what they associate it with. It could be, CD ejector, or it could be a game. Arbitrary. You take the name that actually exists, but it has no relation to what you do. Again, it's a well-protected names, but there's no association between Bluetooth, Gajin, Oxygen. You have to again mark it. And if English is not your first language, make sure you choose the right words. One of the gaming company came to me and basically said, okay, listen, we have a hidden objects, really nice game, looks nice, forest, and there's a rabbit, there's a squirrel. We want to call it a morning wood. For those who don't know English well, morning wood means morning erection. If you release something in Amsterdam, it might actually work, but it's not the target audience that we're trying to reach, okay? So be careful in choosing the name. Suggestive, Pinkster, Apple, the Newton, hit on the head, education, computers. Toonbox, Play to Max, Puzzle Lab. I have an article that is going to be actually in both Russian and English right now, with Russian published, but not in English. And quickly, I'll do the third one about the investor. This is a typical conversation of my clients with the investor. So when you talk to the investors, make sure that you have a term sheet. Term sheet means that you basically have some terms, some structure of the company. And I'll skip through a couple of slides because I don't really have the time. And whoever is interested, I can send you my presentation and the slides to describe it. But these are all the major assets that you really need to do with an investor. Make sure that he doesn't take your company away. The fourth one, don't make investor do your work. Because if you make investor do the company, IP protection, everything else, you devalue your own assets, you devalue your own company. So make sure is that you at least something ready and put things on paper in the agreement. The fourth area is basically bad deals with publishers. No duties, no representation, no warranties, no ability to terminate agreement if they, and the biggest thing with game company, will just give you the royalty, but will deduct the expenses. So unless you have expenses defined, they can deduct overhead, they can deduct legal fees, which are sometimes high, by the way. But, you know, make sure that expenses are defined in really small, basically definition, or at least something that you can calculate. And exclusivity, again, it's just the biggest pain in the industry. You have exclusivity, but he doesn't sell anything. And, you know, you cry, it's like, come on, let's start marketing, do promotion. If you do exclusivity, three things you do. Time, performance, territory. So where is he selling, how much he's gonna sell it for, and the territory. And if he doesn't, then you have to terminate either contract or at least terminate the exclusivity so you can sell it yourself. So, and a couple of other things. And my last one is basically the biggest thing right now in the industry is user acquisition. But make sure that you have good privacy laws to be protected by, good PII, personal identifiable information, and the stuff that you did with the company, with your game, information is actually yours. So if you have a customer but you can't use the PII, you cannot sell it, you cannot spam it, you know, obviously we don't call it spam, but if you cannot transfer personal identifiable information, it's not really your asset. And make sure that you adjust PII to your own business. Don't use Facebook. Why not use a Facebook privacy policy? You just don't have their legal budget, okay? They get sued all the time. And just make sure that, I mean, you can follow their steps, their lead on some of the things, but make sure that it's done. So what happens if you don't do those things? You basically, first of all, of course, you need to prioritize. I mean, somebody might prioritize a relationship with founders, somebody with IP protection, somebody with sales. I mean, it all depends on you. And I'm sure some of you were sitting there when I talk about the founders, say, yeah, I had that conversation. You could lose rights, you could lose technology, you could lose secrecy, exclusive use, you can use goodwill, trademark, time, meaning that, you know, somebody jumped in the market first. But for me, it's not even about the money, okay? For me, it's in success. The biggest problem when you do those crucial mistakes is, it's okay if your gaming company or game is not successful, but what if it is? And what if it's no longer yours and you cannot really reap the benefits of the success? So for me, the biggest regret is not the failure, it's the failure in success. So, and hopefully this has been helpful, and I'll be delighted to take your questions if there are any time left.
Thank you.